US President Barack Obama has arrived in South Korea for the final stop on his much-watched visit to Asia.
After wrapping up his trip to China yesterday, he's expected to focus on North Korea's nuclear ambitions during talks in Seoul today. For more, Brendon O'Connor is an Associate Professor in American Politics at the US Studies Centre, and he joins us now from Sydney. Brendon O'Connor, good morning.
Good morning.
Now, in China, Barack Obama's visit was so tightly controlled that he was pretty hamstrung because he wasn't able to play to his strengths of contact with people. Do you agree with that?
I think the meeting with students, this town hall meeting, was fairly effective. It didn't get out to the Chinese television audience to the degree he might have hoped, but it did play to some of his skills. He was quite adept at answering the questions from students and from the internet. So it wasn't a tough hitting session. The questions were probably stage managed to a large extent, but I think it showed off some of his skills. It hasn't played that well back in the US because he didn't say enough about human rights issues and didn't hit the Chinese hard enough for some of the likings of the American pundits. But in general, I thought he did fairly well, actually.
Yeah, were you surprised that, I was going to ask you, were you surprised that he was so forthright in answering some of the questions about all people deserving basic rights?
Yes, that played to the strength of the US as a nation that's wanted to promote its values abroad. I know George W. Bush tried to do that and people didn't really respond to it very positively, but I think coming from Obama it probably sounded more measured. He talked a lot about children's rights, which is something hard to argue against. So I think he was on a strong footing there, and also women's rights. So I think he did well, but it was a subtle message rather than a sledgehammer.
Now, there are a lot of issues, the economy, Tibet, Iran. How did the US-China relationship emerge generally after this visit?
Well, it's amazing the increase in trade that the US has engaged with China. When Bill Clinton visited in 1998, the US traded twice as much with Mexico. Now the US and China have this enormous trading relationship, second only to the relationship with Canada, and obviously this massive debt that the US has with China. In 1998 it owed more money to Spain. So there's a great deal of sensitivity there on both sides. The US of course needs China to hold that debt, and hopes that the Chinese one day will revalue their dollar so it might come to a more realistic parity with the United States.
Well, on the economic front, how can the US make demands about the value of the yen when they're slapping tariffs and duties on Chinese products?
Yeah, good question. I mean, I suppose that's the Chinese response. The US have just put a 35% tariff on Chinese tyres. The US tyre industry has really struggled for a long time, an area where a lot of jobs have been lost. So Obama, I think, has to limit those kinds of changes in the US if he's going to have credibility arguing for a free trade relationship in the Asia-Pacific, which is, I suppose, one of the few things that really came out of the APEC summit in Singapore.
Now, Barack Obama also visited Japan, and we might just bring up a photo of when he met Emperor Akihito in Japan. He bowed to the emperor, and the conservative bloggers are having a bit of a sledge at Barack Obama over this, saying it's a blow to US esteem that the president would bow to someone. Do you think that'll be noticed outside Republican circles at all?
I'd say not. It's one of those probably storms in a teacup. It seemed to me that you go to a foreign country, you respect their culture, and it didn't seem such a big deal. But some have made a huge deal of it, saying the United States is a society which doesn't respect monarchy and dynasties and the like. So I think it's one of those things that will blow over. And I suppose Japan was very anxious about the US visit. It had been anxious that it gets overlooked at times, and I suppose there was some healing to be done there, suggesting that the US would be engaged with Japan and would want to take it very seriously.
And just back in the States at the moment, there's a lot of focus on Sarah Palin because she's launched her book over there, and we've got another graphic to bring up now of the front page of Newsweek. She's on the front page of Newsweek at the moment in a pair of running shorts. Do you think she will be the candidate put up to run against Barack Obama at the next election?
No, but I've ordered my book, so I suppose the hype is unstoppable, and it's been amazing how much coverage she's received, and in some ways how little coverage the trip to Asia, as I think, received in some ways. But as a political candidate, I think she's dead in the water until she shows a bit more substance. I think running away from the governorship of Alaska is a grave mistake if she wants to be treated seriously as a politician. So she's probably got a career as a television host, as a celebrity, celebrity, but as a politician, I really have my doubts.
Yeah, we're having a look at this photo now of her on the front page of Newsweek. It's a year-old photo of her in running shorts. Do you think it was a bit of a cheap shot of the media to use a photo like that when she's launching a book?
She's complained about it as being sexist, but in some ways it is part of her appeal that she's a fairly good-looking woman and that she's got a lot of people who just find her an attractive political figure, particularly on the American right, both conservatives and probably a lot of white southern males. So she's got this strange kind of appeal in the United States, and I think she'll say that it's not the kind of thing she'd want to see on Newsweek, but I'd say it might help sales in some regards.
Okay. Brendon O'Connor, thanks very much for talking to us this morning.
Pleasure to join you.